Jay-Z, Beyonce, Denzel, Will Smith, Jennifer Hudson, and on and on and on and on. And then you think, look at this genius, right? The exception of me, but look at the genius in that room. Look at the power of that place. And then, as you said, we can't even walk down the street, right? Because to be white is to deputize yourself. It's to be deputized,
yeah.
Right?
Right.
You not the police. You can call the police for us drinking water, lemonade. Black people in Oakland with barbecue. What is more un-American than separating black people from barbecue? I'm not sure. I think that's in the Constitution as legally wrong. So it's great and it's inglorious. The exceptional black people will always make a way. That's right. And be seen as remarkable. The Heather McGhees of this world, right? Astonishingly brilliant, amazingly eloquent, radiantly beautiful, and generous in spirit, right? I mean, people are going to say, well, yeah, but they can't deny her. But the ordinary black person in the pew, on the elevator, in the subway, right, has to achieve an extraordinary transcendence in order to be seen as human, where mediocre whiteness is seen as normative and therefore defensible. So, yeah, it's really tough right now for those of us who have been given a modicum of success, earned a modicum of success, made a way because of the ancestors giving us grace and mercy and truth and transmitting that to us. But to have to witness a Tatiana and being in your own home and not being safe, or Amber Geiger shooting the young man in his home not safe, that's a metaphor for us being unhoused in America and incapable of trying to convince the rest of our fellow countrymen and women that this stuff doesn't just hurt us, it hurts you too. And let me, because you're brilliant about this far more than I am, but let me just end by saying this part. When people look at Donald Trump, and I know a lot of white brothers, when you got conservative white people going, Jiminy Cricket, I have no frigging idea what that guy is. Yeah, you do. He your product. That's your child. That's in the womb of whiteness. Donald Trump is the fleshly thesaurus. And the concrete definition of what black folk been trying to warn America about for 400 years. Now you get a chance to see it. We told you it was narcissistic. It was lethally unintelligent.
It was sexist,
misogynistic, patriarchal. It's against everything that's human.
And greedy and predatory.
And greedy and self-defeating. And will turn on itself, will cut a hole in the ship that all of us are traveling on to satisfy its thirst for revenge and greed. And so, right, I mean, to me, Donald Trump cannot be an exception, because if he's an exception, we can wash our hands. Oh my God, we got rid of him. Lindsey Graham, you were a problem with or without Trump. Mitch McConnell, you were a problem with or without Trump. Because what you do is perpetuate a legacy of inequality, justify it as the normative action of American democracy, only when an exceptional threat like Donald Trump that everybody can see is a problem do you acknowledge finally that white supremacy is a problem, but it is a problem every day in the interstices of American culture, in the invisible spaces, in the inaudible moans and cries of a people who cannot be heard because they will not be amplified by the empathy that now white brothers and sisters have with us, because finally they get the message. If Donald Trump is what y'all been dealing with, my God, this thing has been horrible. It is.
So what if I told you that racism in America isn't just a black problem, that it's costing all of us, white, black, brown, our future? And today we're going to react to a conversation that cuts deeper than most headlines ever dare. a powerful exchange between Eric Dyson and Heather McGhee lays bare the hidden toll of white supremacy, not just on communities of color, but on white Americans too. So we're not just talking about historical injustice. We're talking about the systems operating right now in 2025 that define everything from healthcare, housing, to education and even opportunity. This is not about pointing fingers, it's about opening eyes, and trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see how deeply embedded racism is in the very framework of our society and how it's silently costing all of us. So guys, buckle up because we're going to be pulling back the curtain on one of the most urgent and uncomfortable truths in America today. And by the end of this video, I promise you won't see whiteness the same way again. So let us watch this clip and then I'll be back with my further analysis.
Except Donald Trump ain't the worst of what we've seen. The reason we have hope, because we done see, look, Jim Crow, enslavement, Reconstruction, we done been through a lot worse than this.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? But white brothers and sisters are now finally seeing the tyranny and terror of white supremacy and what it can do to your civilization. Calls on Turkey, Ukraine, right? This is what ignorant, unenlightened, unmolested by enlightenment does to an American culture. White supremacy is bad for white brothers and sisters too.
Yeah.
I think.
This is, I really want to talk to you about your book, Tears We Cannot Stop. But because you just said that, I think we have to talk about the project that I'm currently working on, which has taken me in some unexpected places. So 4 years ago now, I was on television on the show on C-SPAN called Washington Journal, which is like a live radio call-in show, and but it's on TV. And halfway through, somebody called in and identified himself as Gary from North Carolina, and his first words were, "I'm a white male, and I am prejudiced."
Right.
Now, this is live television, and the whole shot is a real close-up of my face as I have to react to this.
Right.
You know, I'm on there talking about taxes and jobs and voting rights, you know, and he just says, I'm prejudiced, and he goes on to detail his prejudice and great storytelling about his fear of black men and crime and gangs and drugs. And I'm sort of holding my breath and nodding, and then he says to me, and I will never forget it, he says, "But I want to change and become a better American. And I want to know what your guest can do, to tell me to do."
Yeah, that was a famous moment right there.
So, you know, this moment went viral. I answered him. I finally exhaled, I think. And I said the first thing that came to my mind, which was thank you for admitting what people have such a vested interest in denying, right?
Yes.
And then I went on to tell him a few things that he could do to sort of integrate his life, because that's the thing, you know, we make it seem like it's so intractable and impossible and difficult just because it's been here for so long. But it's not that hard to actually look racist beliefs and ideas in the face, identify them, don't suppress them, don't be ashamed that in a society where racism is like the oxygen that we breathe, we are inhaling it, and yes, we exhale it from time to time. Don't be ashamed of it, laugh at it, and put it aside and recommit yourself to the fight to make sure that it doesn't determine the life chances of anybody in our society. That's what we have to do. And so in shorter, simpler words, that's what I said to this Gary from North Carolina on C-SPAN. The moment went viral, but it struck me at that moment more than at any other time that there is a cost of racism to white people too. And I think that actually, when we only talk about white privilege, which is real, you can count it, you can weigh it, you can smell it, you can feel it, but it's not the whole story.
Right.
Because when we only talk about the way that racism advantages white people and disadvantages people of color, we're actually buying into the same zero-sum paradigm of racial competition that says we are groups that are ineffably separate, and therefore what is good for one group is necessarily bad for the other. And that's not true.
Right.
We are in this society together. We breathe the same air, racked by pollution because of environmental injustice. Excuse me. There's a study that shows that white people who live in segregated cities have more pollution than white people who don't. The people of color in those segregated cities have more pollution than the white people, but the white people have more in a segregated space because that city thinks it can pollute, because it thinks it can only target people of color. It's the air, people. The central metaphor of this book that I'm writing is about when towns across America, not just in the South, drained their public swimming pools rather than let black children swim too. And it feels like that's, in so many ways, what we have been doing since integration across this country. We have pulled back from funding higher education in a way that it used to be basically free when the student population was white. And now that the student population is more diverse, we have cut back on funding and said, you know what, you pay for it. And in fact, keep paying for it for decades and decades, because debt is what we know what to do to black and brown people. There are so many more examples, and writing this book has taken me to the strangest places, and I know that you experience this too, where you start somewhere and it keeps going, and you're digging and you're digging, and you realize that in fact racism is the organizing principle of our society. Has been from the very beginning. It was the only way to excuse the engine of our economic growth, the kidnapping of millions, the slaughter of millions. And so we have to recognize that this can't just be our problem. And for white Americans, I think it's important to articulate a way in which they have skin in the game and invite the multiracial coalition that has been so elusive, because the plutocrats have always used race to divide us, have always used race to divide white and brown and black people from one another, even when they have common interests. But I think that multiracial coalition is forming right now in America. It is race conscious, it's not colorblind, and it is going to propel a new social contract. And you know, you wrote your book, your most recent book, as a sermon to white America. You know, in many ways, we're in a conversation with white America.
Yes.
Say a little bit more about why you felt like that needed to be an audience at this moment.
No, what you're saying is so important, and please don't assume that that's the norm. There's a lot of skepticism among black people. Why are you talking to white folk? Why are you trying to explain stuff to them, right? You remember Malcolm X? Remember Malcolm X in Boston, and he's giving him the what for, and then he travels to New York, and the white girl from Boston is so taken by what Malcolm has said, moved by his words of indictment, relentless and vigorous engagement, and she's like attracted to that. I want to figure out what to do, and so she hunts him down, so to speak, tracks him down in New York and says, Minister Malcolm, what can I do, a white girl? And you know the famous answer, nothing.
Nothing.
Right? Now he admitted later it was wrong, but that, and I don't want to indict black people, that's an understandable thing. My students say, I ain't came to school. They've said it better than that. You said, is that what you're teaching them at Georgetown, really? I ain't came to school? Really, though? Yes, we know dangling participles, gerunds, and the like, right? But African-American vernacular English articulates deep and profound philosophical sensibilities that are exhausted in the infinite capacity of speaking the King's English to the Queen's taste. So, I ain't came to school to be teaching white folk. I got grades to get. I got stuff to do. I ain't trying to educate folk. So I got up before the class one day. I said, I feel you. I didn't come to Georgetown to be teaching white. Oh, yeah, I did, actually. oh, wait a minute. That's my job. Oh, my God. Of course.
Yeah.
Is it unfair? Yeah. Is it burdensome? Yes. Would I rather be just Michael Eric Dyson, professor at Georgetown, and not all the students of color and a lot of others who come to me because they saw me on TV or because they need to have a conversation they can have with others? Is that in my paycheck? No, but is it necessary? Yes. Yes. And so it is a burden in that sense, the women dealing with ignominious sexism and patriarchy, having to educate foolish men every day. No extra pay for that. And that's daily, right?
In fact, less pay. For
come on, 70%
Right.
on the dollar. So the thing is that there is a legitimate and healthy skepticism about, hey, part of the Black Lives Matter and the self-care movement, and I must admit, I'm outside that parameter. You know, and initially I joked about it like, man, Dr. King had to stop in the middle of the March on Washington. I have to go to my psychological therapy. I'll be back on the road after this. That was, you know, it was funny, but it wasn't right, because King could have used some of that therapy. Right, could have used some of that relief. When they opened his body up at 39 years old, they said he had the heart of a 65-year-old man. The pressure was relentless. He was clinically depressed. So I say that to say, I understand the legitimate and healthy skepticism that many black people have about this, and yet the reason I think we cannot help but respond to white brothers and sisters, given what you said about the rising interest in and investment in by white folk of a race-conscious coalition, of trying to do something serious. When folk want to know, you got to answer. When they ask you, you gotta tell them. And my book, deliberately, I know there's a movement among many African American writers, look, and it's wonderful. Toni Morrison said, I write for black people.
Yeah.
If y'all listen in, that's good, right? There's something beautiful about that. Because now she doesn't determine her philosophical oeuvre. She doesn't determine what the baseline is for her by looking at a dominant European culture and missing out on the mythopoetry of her own indigenous African base, right? That blackness that resided in Lorain, Ohio. So that's beautiful. I got that too. You can hear it. The gut bucket is in me. Unapologetically. I'm too old to major in anything else right now. This is what I've been. This is what I do. However, it is critical and vital what Ms. McGhee has said in terms of trying to explain, right? Lucy, you got some explaining to do? We got to explain, help demystify, demythologize, deconstruct what's going on here. And in that sense, we have to have a conversation that says to white folk, Martin Luther King Jr. said a long time ago, it's killing you. He's in jail in Birmingham. His white jailer comes to him, you know, Dr. King, the warden too. Segregation is right and integration is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. He said, no, it's not. And they argued. And then he finally said, how much money do you make? And when that white jailer told him, King said, hell, you need to be out here marching with us.
That's right.
Because poor white people are not being advantaged by Donald Trump.
That's right.
Isn't that the tragedy? Isn't that the harsh irony? That the very folk who invested in what Du Bois in 1935, read Black Reconstruction, he called it a psychological wage of whiteness. At least I ain't a nigger. That's what they tell them. At least you're not a Negro. We're ripping you off. You ain't got no good money. We're not paying you a fair wage. You are poor, white trash. We got you on the wrong side of the tracks too. We got you in indentured servitude. But at least you're not black. This is what Du Bois in 1935 talked about. So if we can tell white folk in terms, your water system is our water system, right? What's more childish than saying white water fountain, black water fountain? Dude, it's the same water, right? Like it ain't like it's you getting water from Mars. Right? So what's more childish and yet inane and insipid and just dumb to believe that you can somehow segregate natural resources. Now, you can redirect them toward yourself. You can redistribute wealth to yourself. You can keep kids in poor schools, and you can make the society horrible. But even there, to extend what Ms. McGhee is talking about, the stuff's gonna come back on you. You think you segregating yourself from poor society. You think you're somehow quarantining your kids, and then your kids are the ones who are the mass murderers. Mm-hmm. They blowing shit up. We're in a church. Shit 'em and jet 'em up. They are destroying the moral infrastructure that you have protected them against. You thought the threat was a Negro. You thought the threat was some black person out there, some Latinx, some person that works, gets up, you call lazy. They get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. You ain't getting up that early, except if you're trying to look for some more opioids. Us, those of us making it, while we're demonizing those who are on the margin. So yeah, white supremacy and racism destroys the heart of an entire community and country. And it is wrecking us right now. And the investment in so many white brothers and sisters in a guy who doesn't fundamentally care for them. This is not your friend. And the tragedy is, though, right after the election, on, I'll say our side, I'll make it the royal we, choose yourself. But when Bernie Sanders said, see, this is the problem is, yes, I like women and I like blacks, and I wrote the damn bill. But he said, we got to go back. Wait, slow down now on the left. We have to go back to the universal? To be race transcending? This is a liberal idea. This is an enlightened ideal. Now you want to take us back to what you think is neutral. Whiteness is always seen as objective and therefore neutral. To be neutral in whiteness is to reinforce the status quo, which is white observant. Neutrality is the friend of whiteness. Neutrality is the machinery of whiteness. Objectivity is the infrastructure of whiteness, because whiteness has been rendered invisible and therefore normal and therefore neutral. It is seen as American. The great philosopher Beyonce knows said that it has been said that racism is so American that if we challenge racism, it looks as if we are challenging America. So when Ms. McGhee talks about the price to be paid, not zero sum, because you look at an argument about capitalism. Capitalism has actually helped a whole bunch of people. So it's not we're going to say, oh, capitalism has been altogether bad, that zero-sum thinking. No, it's been great. But can you imagine an alternative where many more people could be helped? Yeah, it's been good, but it's been limited. So we ain't going to say either or. Either it's capitalism, socialism, right? We know that many good things have happened, but far better things could happen if we were to embrace a much more open-minded, engaged perspective that allows us to see each other as human. And if we refuse to do that, I think we're sinking American civilization.
That's so right, Michael. And, something you said before about how central hope is to the black politic is just really real for me. I'm going to tell a personal story. So the thing happened in November of 2016. And I was at a watch party with some progressive groups, some grassroots groups, some labor unions here in New York, and I saw things. I saw his face continue to come up on the screen with a check mark next to it, and I just I withdrew. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. I just picked up my bag, and I walked out into the night, and I felt, it was like, I felt an armor just sort of falling in plates all over my body and my mind. It felt heavy. It felt sort of sequential down to my toes. But at the same time, it felt somewhat comforting. And it was, I don't know if you've ever had an explosion happen near you. I hope not. But that ringing in your ears that happens, and the sort of clarity in that moment where you can sort of sense nothing and yet everything. That's what I felt. And what the refrain was that you've been preparing for this your whole life. Your ancestors knew. I used to say in the fight that we are in for a more just world, no matter how hard it gets, my ancestors had to do so much more with so much less. And they knew about this man and the forces that he is marshaling and leaving in corners across this country for us to clean up for the next generation. But the next day, I woke up and went to work. And at that time, I was running DEMOS, a progressive think tank. That's a multiracial organization, lots of millennials, and many white folks. And we had a breakfast meeting. I said called everybody in, and I'm still got my armor on, right? I'm still sort of hearing things and seeing things, but not really. I'm just like boom, 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 and everyone around me who is white is in tears. And I just couldn't muster them. I knew why they were crying. I knew the stakes as well as they did. But I both wasn't surprised, and then I also wasn't as despairing.
Right.
At the exact same time. Right? And it made me think about the centrality of hope to the black politic. Right? So many of the articles about Elijah Cummings, the Honorable, this week have said, the child of sharecroppers, right? He was the child of sharecroppers, and he really did, but he did not get to live to see it, take down a corrupt president.
That's right.
I'm the descendant of enslaved people on both sides. And so hope is so central. And I think in many ways, just as our hands have been the engine that have made so much of America's wealth and so much of America's foundations, I think our hope has in many ways been the engine of American political renewal. And I don't want to leave it there, because I think it's worth it for us to think about what is it that we are seeing that is unseen in this moment.
That's powerful.
I think about sometimes my job as someone who's trying to advance over the horizon policy ideas before they're politically possible, as I'm standing in the future and I turn around and say, come on, y'all, it's warm up here, right? This is what it's going to be. I think about a society in the very near future, relatively speaking, where we truly, truly have policies and practices in place that force us into relationship with one another.
Okay, one of the most jarring points Michael Eric Dyson makes is about mediocrity. He says mediocre whiteness is often rewarded, while black excellence must be exceptional just to be seen as human. Let that sink in, because it's not about the hate, it's about the normalization of inequality. It's about system built to uphold one group, even at the expense of everyone else. Heather McGhee, on the other hand, takes it even further. She argues that racism is a self-defeating force, that when white Americans oppose universal health care or better education out of racial resentment, they end up undercutting their own futures. Think about that. Draining public pools to avoid integration. That's not just symbolic. That's a policy choice that hurts everyone. And here's where what's world. White people in segregated cities breathe in more pollution. That's right. In trying to isolate people of color, the system poisons everyone. Racism does not just oppress, it corrodes the very infrastructure of a society. We are all paying the price for a lie that whiteness equals to superiority. We must wake up. We must stay vigilant, because the most powerful part is the myth of meritocracy. McGhee calls it a racial lie. We are told anyone can succeed if they work hard, but the truth, success is engineered. It's not about effort, it's about access. And if you're black or brown, the access comes with a price that white mediocrity never has to pay. So, my people, I don't want to take much of your time. And as I wind up, I want you to listen to what I'm going to tell. I'm going to say. And let's talk about what this really means. Because if you're being honest, truly honest, then we have to admit that white supremacy is not just a fringe ideology. It's not just shallow's file. It's the foundation. It's the air. It's the idea that white lives should always come first, even if it means destroying public systems that benefit everyone. That's it. So Trump's rise wasn't a fluke. It was a backlash, a racial reaction to the idea of a black president, to demographic change, to equity. His success was built on white fear and white fragility. But here's what people miss. White people are too hurting. The opioid crisis, joblessness, crumbling schools, that's not a coincidence, that's a blowback. McGhee puts it at best that racism hurts you too. Yes, you white people. The systems that uphold white dominance are economically unsustainable. White families are drowning in student debt, paying more for healthcare, and struggling with childcare. Not because people of color are taking too much, but because society refuses to build shared prosperity. All right, and here's the catch though. Many white Americans still can't admit this. Why? Because to accept it means giving up the lie of being the default, the superior, the hero of the story. That's the hard truth to swallow, but it's the only way forward. My white brothers and sisters, that's the only way forward. So, what's the solution here? We need white accountability, not guilt, not fragility, but truth-telling and responsibility. We need policies that don't just treat symptoms but rebuild systems, from reparations and public health care to reimagined education that serves all kids, not just those who test well. We need multiracial coalitions built not only on colorblindness but also on cautious and shared struggle. And most of all, we need hope. The kind of radical hope that believes a better America is possible if we are all brave enough to face that we've been running from what we've been running all through for centuries. But here's the truth. We can't heal what we won't face. So the next time someone says racism only affects people of color, remind them racism is robbing all of us. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you getting me? So, if this video opened your eyes, share it, drop a comment, especially if you disagree, and don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation. Thank you for staying with me, and I hope to see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony.